welcome to the Hunch Voice. My name is Emma, product marketer here at Hunch, and today on the Hunch Voice we'll demystify the secret behind the best-in-class personalized creative. The question is, how do you take real-time data to create thousands of personalized ads at scale to turn users into customers? Scaling campaigns and applying data from analytics is now well within the capabilities of in-house marketing teams and agencies, thanks to dynamic creative ads. This is what all top brands use to personalize their offerings for their customers, and we're going to tell you exactly how you can use dynamic creative for your brand or agency. And today we're having Sinisa Rakovic, our CEO, as well as Nebojsa Knezevic, our head of product. Welcome, guys. Okay, so after seeing and creating thousands of ads, we've concluded that a personalized creative outperforms the generic one. So we have the data, but still creatives aren't that thumb-stopping on paid social. What's the problem that we're seeing here?
Well, I think the first question is, how do we come to that conclusion that, personalized creative actually works, right? And so let's take, sort of peel the onion back and take a step back to say that, brands today are testing, and they're doing lots of testing, right? With, in today's sort of environment with headwinds in terms of privacy and signaling loss on, these platforms, brands and agencies essentially are, left with less data to work with in terms of targeting. So what a lot of brands are doing is just figuring out ways to be more efficient and, testing and figuring what creative responds to what audiences. Knowing that, a static creative could be launched versus a creative that's dynamic in its nature. By and large, that creative, which is driven by data, performs better. And it kind of makes sense if you think about it, right? So if you're at a specific location and if you're driving, sort of localized playbooks or location-specific creatives, there's more context for you to figure out, why should I choose that product? So, lots of brands are bringing national communication strategies down to the local level. So in that case, personalization is sort of around the location. So I think what marketers are sort of faced with today are these sort of processes where they've shown widely accepted that you have to have hundreds of campaigns and you have to test hundreds of creatives and you have to do 100x times than you did maybe 12 months ago or 24 months ago, and that's changing, right? So I think what creative automation, dynamic creative, intelligent creatives essentially speak to is sort of giving the power back to the marketers to spend the quality time on analysis and figuring out where the biggest impact can be made versus actually, doing the manual components of campaign settings and creatives and trafficking them to see what the results are going to be.
Yeah, so currently we see a couple of things like not web, but social platform 1.0 brought the brand voice to direct audience, and your competitors were other brands. So you were trying to address your user, but in essence what that meant was I need to present my offer. I need to have a better offer than the other brand, which worked to an extent. But right now that's not your main competitor. With Social Web 2.0 you're actually competing for attention with content creators. So you have people who are geared towards getting attention, their main goal is getting attention, not selling something, which puts brand in that position. They're okay, how do you communicate this? It's not always about discount or anything. And actually what this means is it means relevance. So we see that only a month ago we read the news about how Gen Z and Gen X is actually doing searches on TikTok and doing searches on Instagram. So they're not Googling stuff, they're actually searching for stuff on TikTok. And that works in a completely different way, and the only way you can achieve that level of relevance is some sort of addressable content. So the content has to have any bearing on the user in order to be relevant. You can have as big a discount as you want. I mean, you can probably always, huge discount will always sell something. But that's not the way to run business. You can't be discounting things 80% all the time in order just to get lower CPMs on Netflix. So that's not going to work. So the only logical step is okay, it's no longer a brand that I'm competing with. So it's no longer about the offer. It's actually about some context. So that context might be very practical, as Ziggy mentioned. It could be a location or something that really gives information. So, okay, I can go to the restaurant there. But also can be finding another ways to resonate with users. There are users who hold their, values very high. So you have to talk with the users who, interested in animal welfare or in like giving back to community or whatnot, or just like having the tone of voice that they can actually hear rather than just having to do that. So that's what actually has to drive that, like it has to drive a change within brands, but also that means a change in how marketing teams think, how they approach stuff, how design teams approach. Like it's all fine, and then with having like a brand guidelines, but like there comes a point where you have to throw the book out the window. Like you need to think in a new way.
And since there are plenty of user triggers, what elements do brands actually personalize?
So I'll take this one to try to explain. So elements are essentially what one ad comes down to. So we often combine words creative and ad in this, and they're not always one and the same, especially on social. Like the usual word creative meant like you had a key visual, so that's the word which you rarely now hear, like key visual as a point. So that evolved through time, and right now we can say, okay, there are a couple of elements. What are we customizing? We're deciding on the placement, so where will the ad run? Then we have the creative asset itself. That means we can have different imagery, we can have different copy on that, and those are some of the elements. And then you have all the rest, and like that, it's a closed loop. Like you can't discard, like there's a headline, which is a separate element from the creative, you have text, but also like it takes you all the way to the landing page. Like if you can manage to have landing pages that are specific to the stuff, that's like, it will get you amazing results. But yeah, to say just in terms of like running a campaign on social web, we're talking about like the positions that you have actually available to you to customize are headline, ad text, and then you have the creative asset itself.
Sigit, this one goes for you. How does technology empower efficient production despite the inherent cost increase involved in personalization?
Yeah, I think as Nebs was sort of describing the process of what could be done right today, I think what's hidden in that process is the amount of work that's necessary to do that, right? And I think when you look at sort of the tsunamis that are right around the corner with TikTok and the For You, sort of the contextualized For You experience, and having brands, create an environment where it's video first, and you have to be somewhat connected to that segment that you're speaking to, right? Inherently in there's a ton of work that has to be done, right? In terms of both creative production, in terms of both, creating the logic to deliver that creative to that specific persona or person, right? So I think technology plays an important role. I don't think, the technology is a silver bullet at any point, that it solves everybody's, pain points. I think what technology plays a role in is to essentially give back marketers time, to do higher yielding tasks where it's like holistically looking at what's happening with data across different channels and customers and audiences, and essentially spending the time where they can be smarter with their, campaign. So technology essentially is, sort of the artery, the main artery that allows for the data to flow through and the creatives to be delivered and flow through. But essentially, it's just giving time back to marketers. And I think part of when we talk about and we speak to our agencies and brands, it's where I can't get enough done throughout the day. There's so many things that you have to do, so many tests that you have to do, so many different products you have to promote, right? So where do you find the time in order to compete today, right? Now, so that's the question where technology comes in, where if you have specific workflows that are set up, specific automated playbooks that are set up, it allows you to be creative and in a sense, use that creativity to get better performance.
So yeah, I would just add to that, like if you look at it, like marketers love to draw up some graphs and dashboards and whatnot. There's probably a graph where you have like how granular the creative is versus what costs it brings and what results it brings. And there's a certain curve that describes like you have to have at least certain level of granularity to achieve increase in performance. Now that effectiveness on that depends on many things. Like if you take a look at a simple ad on Facebook, it's not simple. Like one ad is probably at least 3 placements. So for one ad you have to build 3 sizes, that's just image. And then if you say, oh, I want to do image and video, that's 6 of them. If you do that in 2 languages, now you have 12 assets you need to produce. And then if you want to try 3 messages in 2 languages, like you are at 36 assets. That's amazing amount of work that goes into that. And that has a cost, like real value money cost. So what technology does is it kind of skews that curve in the sense that like the granularity can be higher without the cost increasing. So you're chasing like that ideal shape under the curve for you. So that's what it is.
I think a good example of what technology plays a role, or how technology plays a role in this process, is one of our awesome partners, Digicel, as we're sort of setting up, their sort of regional, scaling campaigns. The creative team, basically had, a task where typically throughout the day they would, have to create 2 or 3 or 4 different images or videos for the sports leagues that they were promoting. And they would do that every single day, and they would create the images, and the media team would come and download those images, go to Facebook and upload those images, go to Instagram, go to, wherever, and upload those images. And I take that process, right? I think what technology did in that sense, right, is essentially liberate the creative team to be creative, right? So I think at certain points when, Nebs and the team set up the automated workflow, it was like, wait a second, do you mean to tell me that for the remainder of the season, we don't have to create another football match or basketball match creative ever for the remainder of the season, right?
Yeah.
And this is hundreds of games, right? And so that's the aha moment where technology comes in and says, okay, how many hours did we give back to that creative team to ideate around, different things, right? So I think in that case, technology is not a silver bullet, but it definitely creates, a more, happy workplace. If anything else, in the end, right? It gives back time to those marketers and creatives to be more efficient, with that time. So,
Next, product side. How do brands go beyond basic DCO than simply changing CTAs and backgrounds?
That's a great question. Like basically, what DCO stands for is dynamic creative optimization. And it started at that, literally, like that was the first way that people use DCO were like, oh, okay, let's try a couple of different calls to actions on display banners and figure out which one is working better. So that was really easy. Right now we're more often talking about dynamic creative and creative strategy, which is like, it leans into DCO in the sense of how the technology works, how it allows you to do that. But like it became smarter, and that's going beyond that CTA. It's like you have more data and you start using that data. Now that data may be something as like real world as store locations. So that's also dynamic creative. Like instead of producing hundreds of ads for hundreds of locations, you produce your master ad and they get hundreds of contextualized ads per location. But also like sometimes you have information of your user segments. You know which users are purchasing often, which users are finding it hard to decide to purchase. There are many things that you actually get, that you actually know, and that part goes into creative strategy. So to put it simple, what technology unlocked is like we're not simply like shuffling colors to figure out what's working. We're actually closing that loop. So you have data which informs the creative, then creative populates the campaign. Campaigns go to the users, but again, that final step doesn't stop there. It's not the end. Like that generates more data which informs the creative, which creates the campaign, which goes out to users. So that's how dynamic creative outgrew the initial DCO. Like that feedback loop became an actual loop which brings to better decisions every next time.
Okay, but what does DCO mean for marketers? And what is the cost of not using DCO?
Yeah, I think, dynamic creative is, comes in different formats or, different forms. Whether it's creative intelligence, whether it's dynamic creative, whether it's creative automation, whether it's AI-driven creative, data-driven creative, however you want to call it, it's essentially, giving marketers a much more powerful way of getting their job done, period. The massive savings in terms of workflows, in terms of communications are massive. So when you're thinking about how many different touch points between the creative and the data team or the creative and the media team you would have to go through to create something manually, it's just a massive differential in terms of having an automated workflow versus a manual workflow. So the cost savings, I think, are large. I don't think
Is the cost of lost opportunities?
Yeah, I think on the one hand, it's definitely resource optimizations or creating operationally efficient workflows. I think the savings there are massive. I think there's two other sides to that story. The other side is then unlocking greater performance. So once you have this workflow and once you can be more efficient in deploying the campaigns and using data to drive that creative into those campaigns, the faster the learnings are, right? You essentially shorten the latency between what you launch and what you learn and how you inform, as Neb said, back the data loops that feeds the creative. So the performance uplifts are incredible. And the third one, which I think is sort of hidden in that process, is being faster with your strategies. I think for example, some companies that want to launch like go-to-market strategies, when you're opening up a new market, instead of hiring a team, hiring an agency and localizing it, you have sort of the centralized command center approach where you can quickly distribute creatives and data and campaigning to that specific market. So I think it gives you a faster go-to-market, right? I think for any company that's looking to expand into different markets, you have to have all three, right? You have to have an operationally efficient workflow that allows you to be faster to market, which allows you then to be better in performance. So I think the savings are real, but also in terms of the cost, not just the cost savings, but also the performance are up. When we look at across our customers, when we look across our brands, by and large, every single company that's using some form of automation in terms of creative or a campaign see better performance in the end.
And finally, how can agencies leverage DC to the fullest with Hunch?
So idea is you have to have a starting point. There's as you mentioned, the technology isn't the silver bullet. You have to have a problem to solve. So I think the biggest asset that agency can bring to the process is understanding of the need of the client. The most transparent question that we ask our clients is what is the thing that you wanted to do but you couldn't allocate the resource, didn't have the time, it was too expensive to build and whatnot. And that's it. Agencies are good at that part. Agencies gain understanding of their client and have to understand the market, have to have a strategy. And then at one point they get into a meeting which is organizing a campaign, say, okay, we don't have time for this, we don't have budget for this, client doesn't want to do this because it's too expensive, it's too time consuming, whatnot. So those things that stand between create how you want a client in a pitch and what you actually do, what you actually give up on in the process between winning a pitch and actually launching a campaign. That's the room where the technology can come in and say, no, look, that amazing idea that you had at the beginning, let's do that.
Yeah, I think to go on what Neb said, what we generally see as a trend when we speak to our agency partners is that the agencies are looking for ways to differentiate themselves and deliver innovative solutions to their, and brands, clients, right? So I think there's lots of different ways to be innovative. But one thing's for sure is that agencies have to have a core capability to build or manipulate and use technology to their advantage and to the client's advantage. And I think most agencies that we talked to today, even the creative agencies, are looking for a way to leverage technology, right, from a creative production perspective, scaling perspective, and it revolves around three core pillars, which is the creative technology, the data, right, and having that expertise around data, right, and the third, which is media or campaigns, right. So I think in each of those three core pillars, agencies are innovating and helping brands, deliver, interesting, playbooks or solutions, to lots of these different channels. And agencies are kind of in a tough spot if you think about it, right? So native platforms like Facebook, TikTok, if you look at TikTok, for example, now, out of the box, TikTok offers a ton of different capabilities, right? And so agencies are, in a very unique situation of how to use different channels and how to, have a cross-channel approach, to the company's, needs. And I think those agencies that are close to the data, that are close to, iterative sort of creative playbooks are the ones that can deliver those, interesting and innovative solutions to their clients across all these channels.
Great, thank you both for being here, and thank you guys for staying with me. Hope this was valuable, and that now you understand that contextual data is what drives brand recognition and prospecting campaigns. This is where we make crucial audience breakdowns to identify the best performing topics and triggers. Delivering tailored user experiences was never this practical. So, ready to take the leap to dynamic creative? Give us a call. And make sure to subscribe to our channel and stay tuned for more new content. Also follow us on LinkedIn and subscribe to our weekly newsletter for more new content every week. Bye!